Welcome to a meeting of the licensing committee. Did you say something, Cesar? Okay, sorry.
There was an echo.
Yeah, I know. Okay, we're okay now. This is a meeting of the licensing committee of the California Board of Psychology. It's Thursday, June 13th, 2019. We're meeting in Sacramento, California. And before we get started, or as we get started, could we have roll call so we can establish a quorum, please?
Fu,
Here.
Harpsheet. Here. Horn.
Here. So, thank you. So we're all here. I want to read the goal of the licensing committee. The goal of this committee is to ensure valid licensing, continuing education, and licensure renewal policies and procedures, making recommendations for changes as appropriate. The committee will also ensure a valid and reliable examination process to assess professional knowledge, as well as the laws and ethics governing the profession, working with such entities as the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards, ASPPB, and the Department of Consumer Affairs Office of Professional Examination Services. So, with that, let me ask, are there any public comments at this point in time for items that aren't on the agenda? The committee won't be able to discuss or take action on any of those items, but we can decide whether to place those issues on a future agenda. So, any public comment? Okay, seeing none. I want to move to approval of the licensing committee minutes from the January 11th, 2019 meeting.
Move to adopt the meetings with any technical amendments that have been submitted before or that might be happening.
All right. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded to accept the minutes with any minus any technical, or with any, including any technical or non-substantive changes or amendments that there might be, which I have a couple of, and I'll just send those over to you. So any discussion about that? Any discussion from the public about those? Seeing none, could we call for the vote?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, the motion passes. All right, so I'd like to welcome, we're having a presentation about licensed educational psychologists, who they are, what they do, from the Board of Behavioral Sciences that licenses this group of professionals. There has been some public confusion from the public because we're the Board of Psychology, and licensed educational psychologists have the name psychologists, and they're not licensed by this board, so there's been some confusion. So we'd like to hear from y'all all about this license, what distinguishes it, what y'all do, and all like that. So if you would introduce yourselves and begin with your presentation, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having us. I'm Kim Matson, the Executive Officer for the Board of Behavioral Sciences, and with me today is our board chair, Elizabeth Betty Connolly, who is a licensed educational psychologist. So you're going to hear directly from the person that's in the field. This is great. I'm going to review some of the, the requirements to become a licensee, and then Ms. Connolly is going to answer a lot of the practical and practice questions for you. So, all righty. You're welcome. So, since 1970, the Board of Behavioral Sciences has been regulating the practice of licensed educational psychologists. The history of how they got to us, I don't know. I'll just be that honest. And I agree, when you have the term psychologist, it seems like, why are you not under the Board of Psychology? I'm sure there's a great history there, but I'm not aware of it. Yes, we could, yes. So anyway, all the applicants to become a licensed LEP must satisfy the educational experience and examination requirements that are set forth in the statutes. The LEP must renew their license every 2 years and must complete 36 hours of continuing education. And this is identical to what our other 3 license types do, which are marriage and family therapists, clinical counselors, as well as social workers. So everybody's doing the same. Any allegation of misconduct is investigated by the board, and all confirmed violations of law are subject to discipline. And what governs the practice of an LEP is set forth in the board's laws and regulations, as well as the California Association of School Psychologists Code of Ethics. Our licensure requirements are as follows. The applicant must have, at minimum, a master's degree in psychology, educational psychology, school psychology, counseling and guidance. They must complete 60 semester units of postgraduate work in pupil personnel services, or PPS. Then they need to complete 2 years of full-time or equivalent to full-time experience as a credentialed school psychologist in the public school. They must have 1 year of supervised professional experience in an accredited school of psychology program, or 1 year full-time or equivalent as a credentialed school psychologist in the public schools under the direct supervision of a licensed educational psychologist or licensed psychologist. Once they hit those benchmarks, they submit their application to the board, and they must take and pass a clinical exam with us. Just a few facts about the LEP practice. All of their scope of practice and what they can and can't do is set forth in Business and Professions Code 4989.14, and all LEPs are or were school psychologists. They can do educational evaluations. They can diagnose psychological disorders related to academic learning. They can administer diagnostic tests related to academic learning, including tests of academic ability, learning patterns, achievement, motivation, and personality factors. They can interpret those tests related to academic learning. They can provide psychological counseling for individuals, groups, and families. They can consult with other educators and parents on issues of social development, behavioral, and academic difficulties. They can conduct psychoeducational assessments for the purpose of identifying special needs. Commonly, I think we refer to these as the IEP, the Individual Education Plan. And they develop that treatment plan and strategies to address that issue. And they coordinate the intervention strategies for management of individual cases. An LEP may practice in a private or clinical setting. Additionally, I'd like to point out that a lot of the education for our 4 license types, there's a great deal of overlap in the degree program, but it's just that area of specialty or practice that really separates how they approach a particular client. So at this point, that's sort of the brief overview of how you get to become an LEP. But in terms of practice and what that looks like, I'm going to defer to my board chair, Betty Connolly.
Thanks so much. Board members, any questions?
When I was reading number E, when it talks about facts about practice, and it says providing psychological counseling for individuals, groups, and families. So is that pretty broad counseling, or is it identified as specific around the issues that the LEP is dealing with?
So I think the reason, and I'll backtrack when I'm answering this, I think the reason we ended up probably under the Board of Behavioral Sciences is because of the alignment of our our practice is much more in alignment with the other license types that fall under the Board of Behavioral Sciences than, for example, a clinical psychologist. So in answer to your question, when we provide counseling to families, everything that an LEP does has to do with students' ability to access education. And so it's very focused. And I even had a conversation with Kim when we were talking about LEPs don't refer to what we do as psychotherapy.
I see.
We really talk about it as counseling, as educationally related counseling. We may, in fact, work with families if that's what the impediment is, or if that contributes in some way to the student's ability to access their education. But it would be a very limited scope of practice. If we're working with a family and they start, a couple goes off and starts talking about their marital issues, we're going to stop that conversation and refocus it back to the reason that we're here is to make sure Herkimer is doing well in school, and what are we working on to make that happen. So we really do have a focused scope of practice as opposed to the more broader.
That's helpful. Thanks so much for that clarification.
Okay.
So I have a question. When you're practicing or functioning in the school setting, are you called a school psychologist in that setting, or are you called a licensed educational psychologist?
Typically, if an LEP is working as a school psychologist in that school setting, they're probably going to be referred to in terms of the team, they're going to be referred to as a school psychologist.
Okay.
I would be referred to as a school psychologist.
Okay.
The fact that I have a license has really very little to do with the fact that I'm working in a school. Because school psychologists are credentialed to work in schools.
Right.
The difference is that an LEP can function in private practice. Many LEPs actually contract back with schools, and they may do that to fulfill tasks or jobs or needs that they don't have, the school psychologists don't have the resources to do. I know a lot of the bigger districts, especially in Southern California, have LEPs come in to run their educationally related mental health services programs or to coordinate and provide services under that auspice. That's not to say that school psychologists wouldn't necessarily have the training to do that, but the LEP license kind of affords a little bit more flexibility in that. When we see for example, if a family brings a student to an LEP in private practice, we are, under our code of ethics, we're required to make sure that that family understands that psychoeducational assessment is available for free in the schools, that is provided as part of a free and appropriate public education. But many times when families seek out an LEP in private practice to conduct assessment, they're not necessarily interested in pursuing the special ed supports and services. They want the information to enhance the students' learning or to better understand what maybe some of the difficulties are, but not necessarily going through that IEP process. So sometimes students are seen by an LEP who have been assessed by schools and determined not to be eligible. So just because a student's not eligible for an IEP does not necessarily mean that they don't have some barriers to their learning. And so that's kind of where that connects up.
Have you ever experienced like that kind of confusion that I was talking about, that, are you a psychologist? Or, obviously, again, it's in your title, and that's totally fine, but I'm just wondering, do people think,
I think most LEPs, and again, it goes back to the ethics and our code of ethics, and that we're required, as we're working with individuals or families, to be really clear about our scope of practice. That we are not clinical psychologists. We don't identify ourselves as being clinical psychologists. We don't do a lot of the things that psychologists do. We are really educational psychologists, which means our scope of practice really focuses on access, barriers to accessing education.
I would add that a lot of confusion, I think, just comes from the public and not knowing, just within our 4 license types. If you're to ask the public, who are they seeing, they're going to see, oh, I'm going to see my counselor, or I'm going to see my therapist. The public rarely says, I'm going to go see my social worker, my clinical counselor, and my marriage and family therapist. And so I think it's just sort of a norm that's out there, that's how the public refers to individuals without really knowing the nuances between the license types.
Totally agree with that. Have y'all ever thought about, like, how we could help the public understand the differences between licenses? I mean, has that ever been?
You may see more challenges with it than we do.
Yeah.
I can't say that it is presenting a problem for us as a licensing population that I'm aware of. And again, if someone is coming to an LEP with an issue that is beyond our scope of practice, we are going to refer them to another license type.
And I know by far the majority of you will, I'm not sure it's a problem for psychologists either as much. I'm just thinking of the public here, it's like, the hope would be that that's exactly what people would do. They'd say, here's my scope of practice. Like, I've been called a psychiatrist before. I'm not a psychiatrist, and, but it's like, yeah, I'm going to see my psychiatrist, or people will talk, somebody I start seeing, they'll say something about, well, I need this medication or something. It's like, I have to make it very clear right away. It's not who I am, not what I do. So I understand that happens. I'm just trying to think of a way. And you're right, the public doesn't make those distinctions. But just thinking in a larger sense, is there any way we can help them understand?
I think, Department of Consumer Affairs has the license type book, who you select and why, and the difference. There's always opportunity to provide education to the public in that forum, through brochures, FAQs. There are always opportunities to do that.
And certainly the website provides guidance for the different license types and the scopes of practice.
Yeah.
And again, we are under the same board supervision as any of the other license types. So if someone does provide services that are outside their scope of practice, that would be a board actionable.
Right.
I don't believe that, I've been on the board, this will be, 7 years now? One more year. And I don't think in the whole time that I've been on, certainly LEPs have had disciplinary actions, but I don't believe that there've been scope of practice disciplinary action. So I don't believe it comes up very often.
I would agree with that. I don't recall.
Part of that may be just like you're saying, that people don't know. They don't know the difference. They don't understand that there might be a difference or anything like that. So I'm not interested in creating a problem that's not there, but really just kind of.
And from my perspective, certainly, and maybe a biased perspective, but from my perspective, I don't think it is there.
Yeah.
I think people are referred to LEPs in private practice with a very specific question or challenge, that the reason they're referred to an LEP is because that would be the need. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great, yeah. So.
Man?
Yeah.
Just a quick question related to what Dr. Hornet hinted at the beginning was how, just from the enforcement perspective, how often is there we're actually going to redirect this to the Board of Psychology, and then vice versa from on our end, we're going to redirect this to BBS for any discipline issues. Is that not even a frequent item at all, or what's the air traffic look like?
It's on occasion for an LEP and a psychologist, but I would say that our respective boards partner very well, because a number of the licensees hold both licenses with my board and your board, and so, we share the information as appropriate. I don't want to be in a silo. I think that's not optimal consumer protection. So, yeah, we have a very good partnership with your executive officer and board staff.
Out of curiosity, I read that the minimum educational requirement is a master's degree. Do you happen to know how many of the licensed educational psychologists have higher than a master's degree?
I would say a fair amount, but that's just the entry level. I'm sure many of them go on to get a.
They do. There's a PsyD program. You're probably familiar with that. I wouldn't say it's a large number. I frankly wouldn't even want to hazard a guess. I certainly have colleagues that have EDDs.
Yeah. Okay, I was just curious.
But it's not a huge, I wouldn't think it would be a large number.
Thanks.
Any other licensing committee questions? Well, I really want to thank y'all for coming and presenting and just
Thank you for
helping
inviting
us understand, kind of what y'all do. And I agree, this is a really good collaborative relationship, so that's really nice. I think we're going to have another presentation at is it the next licensing committee meeting?
Yes, we are going to invite commissions on teachers credentialing to come to our next licensing committee meeting scheduled in September to talk about the people personnel services credentials. So basically what are the requirements and what they're looking for when they're credentials professional.
Okay. Will those people then also become licensed educational psychologists?
They
Is
would
that-
have to be a school psychologist to be an
To
LEP.
be an
You
L.
can't be an
okay.
LEP without being
And
a
that,
school
so
psychologist.
the pupil credentialing services
Are the ones
is
that
the one, they
license. They're the
credential
licensing
the
board.
school psychologist first?
They're the
Okay.
licensing board for
Great.
school
Great,
psychology, or
great.
credentialing board, sorry.
Yes, yes,
Misspoke.
yeah.
Credentialing board, yes.
And with that credential, folks have to work in the schools, right?
That's exactly
But
right.
if you become an LEP, then you can move outside of the
And
school
that's-
system.
that's exactly
Yeah,
right.
okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Okay,
And I would
great.
just offer, if you have any follow-up questions, certainly contact me directly or send them through to Antoinette, and we'll be happy to answer them.
Great. Thank you so
you
much.
very
Thank y'all.
much.
You're very welcome.
Is there a chance for public questions? Or?
Absolutely.
Sit back down.
Does anyone in the public have any questions? You're going to need to come up, actually, and ask from a microphone, so we're going to add another chair, so sorry about that, y'all. I totally forgot about that. I was misinformed. It's not my fault.
Hello, my name is Dr. Cynthia Root. I have a PhD in clinical psychology and have been licensed with the Board of Psychology since 2008.
Congratulations. Yeah, you're just out of the early career group.
That's right, I'm now in mid-career. And I was actually invited to come here today by a Board of Psychology member to come and share and ask some questions about some of the confusion that we've been having. I'm a staff psychologist at the regional center, and so the issue that has been coming up for us around LEPs and scope of practice relates to DSM-5 diagnosis. And I can tell you that on the ground, there is a tremendous amount of confusion about where are the boundaries between clinical psychology and LEPs, particularly around the autism diagnosis. I'm not really seeing it around any other diagnostic categories. And I've actually spent hours of time trying to investigate answers to these questions I've talked to the board of directors of CASP, California Association of School Psychologists. BBS wouldn't give me any direct comment on interpretation of the law, which is probably, they referred me to CASP. And we've received a lot of conflicting information about where the boundaries of scope are. And I think if we distill them down, it really relates to, can an LEP do a diagnostic report that ends in a DSM-5 diagnosis, particularly of autism? We've certainly seen, I've had reports come to my desk as someone that does the eligibility review for Regional Center, where we're trying to establish lifelong services under conditions like autism, where an LEP in private practice, seemingly with no referral question related to educational purposes, the parents just want to know what's wrong with my kid. They do a full assessment. It has the same test battery that I would give as a clinical psychologist, and then concludes with the same conclusion that I would offer, which is a DSM-5 checklist indicating for each symptom met or not met clinically, and then offering a clinical diagnosis with an ICD-10 code or DSM code, and just trying to figure out, is that okay? So there's kind of a referral question issue there, but also, can you do this? So there's many questions, I guess, that come up, so I guess I'll throw it over. And so can they give DSM-5 diagnoses would be the first question.
So in a private practice, they could, or that is our practice.
Okay.
However, I think where there may be some confusion or disagreement, I know Chris Jones, who is our LEP representative on the board and takes the lead in many of those, spent hours and hours and possibly even days working with the regional center to talk about whether or not LEPs could work for the regional center to do that diagnosis. And at the end of the day, the decision was made jointly that was not in our scope of practice because it had to do with developmental needs that are unrelated to education, which is not in our scope of practice. And so the decision was made, no, we can't contract with the regional center to conduct those assessments. In the school setting, we don't talk about diagnosis, we talk about eligibility. And the understanding is that we can, in fact, go through the DSM, and we do use the assessments, and we do conduct the complete assessment battery that would be very much in alignment with what a clinical psychologist would do. Educational psychologists can give an ADOS. They're trained. It's within the ADOS who can administer. So I don't know why we couldn't, but the presenting problem, if it's just, I just want to know, because I want to know if my son has autism or something, I mean, that becomes a little, I think that there's a little nebulous there, because technically the presenting problem would have to have an educational impact, although I just want to know if my student has autism. It's hard to believe that wouldn't have an educational impact. So I think you're kind of starting to tease out some pretty fine hairs there. But in terms of receiving medical services or any of the services that are beyond the educational scope, we don't feel like we can conduct those assessments for the regional center or for an insurance group if the purpose is something other than education.
May I offer another question? We so appreciate you coming down very clearly about that. One of the questions that's come up for us is that we have kind of personal communication emails about this topic, but nothing kind of on a more official capacity from BBS or CASP about a position such as this. Do you have any suggestions on, so when we have an LEP out in the community coming in and wanting to vendor for regional center, it's a little awkward to be like, well, I've got all these personal communications with CASP, and we don't have anything that's kind of more formal about that particular issue about referral and how important the referral question is in determining where the boundaries are. Do you have any suggestions on how to get that interpretation in a more formal way?
So I have a thought. I don't know that it's a solution, or
Okay.
it's just a thought, and I'd be happy to take this back. CASP is my professional organization. And full disclosure, I was on the board of CASP for many years, so I feel like I can speak to them. They took it very seriously, and they looked at it, and as I said, Chris Jones spent an inordinate amount of time meeting with the regional center to try and tease that out. I don't see any reason why I couldn't certainly propose to Heidi, who's our executive director, and Chris, who was involved with it, if they could write something up perhaps for CASP today. We're revising our code of ethics right now. We could certainly look at perhaps incorporating some of that
That would be really
into there.
helpful.
Be happy to take that back. Nope, can't speak for them,
Sure.
but I can take it back as a
Appreciate the
suggestion.
A follow-up question would be, when you presented the requirements for licensure of an LEP.
Could you move a little
Oh,
closer?
sorry. When you presented the requirements for licensure for the LEP, it talked about how they needed supervised professional experience in a school setting, that would be the main place where they would be trained, given that they are school psychologists, educational psychologists. And my question is, when you're looking at something like using DSM-5 for a clinical differential diagnosis, how does a school psychologist or LEP obtain the necessary supervised professional experience using, we use the same test instruments, but my understanding is that an LEP would use the test instruments and interview to weigh in on education code and whether someone met criteria for autism or anything else in ed code, whereas a clinical psychologist is using the same test but with a different purpose. We take the data and we look at a clinical differential diagnosis, which you would typically get in community mental health settings or other settings where you have a supervisor that is focused on training you to use the DSM-5 clinically. I'm not clear on how a school psychologist or LEP would get that kind of supervised professional training to use DSM-5.
That's very different. It's a very different training module that you come from. It's a different training background, different perspective. I can tell you that I've gone to, because we're required to take our 36 units of continuing ed every 2 years. I have sat through many a course on identifying autism using DSM-5 criteria and DSM-4 criteria and all of them. So we certainly have the training. I don't know that it would satisfy your clinical. Obviously, we have different backgrounds, different training standards, so it wouldn't satisfy your clinical expectation of a supervised DSM-5 practice. And yet, I do feel like we do have the skills the skills and the training and the experience to look at DSM criteria in a private practice setting. Again, differentiating from a school practice.
I guess what comes up for me around that is, I've had a year of coursework in psychopharmacology. I've taken a number of continuing education classes in psychopharm so that I can have a working familiarity of how medication affects, my clients and kind of the ins and outs of that. But I would not be making any recommendations on medication at the end of my psychological report because that is outside of the scope. I'm not a medical doctor. And this is where I'm seeing the public getting very confused about if an LEP is supposed to be offering about their educational reports tend to be focused on eligibility for special education. Do they meet ed code criteria for autism? That when they move over into DSM-5 that it gets very confusing, again, because they seem to lack even though I totally agree with you, we know so many terrific LEPs that would probably get it right, all the time in terms of diagnosing autism. But I think what we're talking about here is scope of, your lane. and scope of practice. And that's where, even though I might be, correct in the medications I might recommend for one of my clients, it's still outside of my scope. And really, what would be so helpful to those of us on the ground, on the front lines, would be if we could have something in writing that would really help clarify. I believe it was B on your list of scope of practice, that even though it says, may I see it?
My scope of practice says we diagnose psychological disorders.
And it says related to academic learning process, but as I think someone commented earlier, anything could relate to that. And so that's where we're getting LEPs coming and trying to submit reports to Regional Center with DSM-5 diagnoses. And we've heard from CASP that that is within scope of practice. But again, I would offer some questions about how that has been established to be within those boundaries when it seems, differential diagnosis is very complicated and it requires a lot of clinical knowledge. And I'm not sure if the licensure type really offers the supervised professional training that would be needed to give a DSM-5 diagnosis. So I'll take that for.
I think we'll take it
Think
for.
about if you're
for
revising
comment.
information.
I don't think we're going to revise our scope of practice
Okay.
at this point. I don't feel
Okay.
any
No,
reason to do that.
it sounds, just the layperson on the outside, who probably wants my microphone. I would just say, I think there's value from both professions, and by and large, most of the professionals do operate within their lane. But it almost sounds somewhat like a turf war as well. And there's plenty of room, I think, in California for everybody to collaborate and work together to develop what is the best approach to help that child achieve educational goals. It's very clear that the scope of practice for LEPs has really not changed since it came into existence since 1970. And I don't see any reason to change the scope because they are trained, they are supervised, they do provide valuable services. And I think clarity is good, and I would absolutely support Betty's suggestion of talking to CASP about what's appropriate and what's not. But then at the end of the day, if the regional center is not happy with what is being presented, they can make a business decision about what they want to use and what they don't want to use.
I think my comments are related more to just how many confused families come in of, well, the school psychologist said my child has autism, and when we do an actual, full clinical evaluation, sometimes that's not the case. And that's
Exactly.
causing a lot of anguish. So any clarification about why DSM-5 diagnosis would even be necessary in the school, even for private practice LEPs, why that would be part of that would maybe is a talk for another day.
I was
appreciate
just
your,
about to say
allowing
that.
me
I
to
think
ask some
that
questions.
might be a larger issue, and so at this point, I really thank you for your questions, and that's what we want to see. Where do are there confusions? Where do they lie? And is this a big problem or not? Or, what is it? So I really appreciate your
Thank you so
comments.
much. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thanks.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Mr. Fu, you had a question?
Yes, it's a question, comment, which we all love those. So I've heard the term public confusion used several times, and I'm curious just from a data perspective, when that public confusion rises to the level of discipline, and I suspect we don't have the numbers offhand, for me personally, I would be interested in seeing how that public confusion translates to data when it comes to discipline issues. And so, and I'm not asking for numbers, but I think with that consumer protection lens on, I would be curious to say, well, if anecdotally this is what we're hearing, does this actually translate from a data perspective when it comes to complaints with a diagnosis, et cetera? And that's not really a question because I know it's hard to have that data offhand right now when you weren't prepared for that. But I think just from a broad perspective, that's where I would like to see that translated anecdotally into a more data-driven perspective.
And just from a data perspective, we don't get very many complaints about LEPs, quite frankly.
Right.
Most of my, and you might have been experiencing the same trend, it's arrests or
Yeah.
crossing the line, boundaries, those types of things. It's not because the public was confused about who was providing that service.
That's really helpful. Thank you for sharing
You're very
that.
welcome.
Okay, I think we're okay. Oh, wait, we have another, sorry. Dr. Winkleman.
We're going to stop being so helpful.
I just have, hi, I'm Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman with the California Psychological Association. I actually have a quick question. I think it's going to be a lot easier. And I first wanted to thank you both for your presentation. It was very clarifying. I appreciate it. My question is, what about other diagnoses? Do the LEPs that are either in the schools or in private practice give other kind of DSM or ICD diagnoses like anxiety or depression or adjustment disorder, or is it really mostly just autism?
We really do very little with DSM. That's not our wheelhouse. I wouldn't say that it's because we can't. I would say it's because it probably isn't real relevant to what we do. So I can't speak to the full scope of practice. I mean, I can't speak to what everybody does in terms of LEPs and using the DSM to identify anxiety. It's just, it is, I would say if it is, it's probably a low frequency issue because it just isn't terribly relevant. I think autism comes into the picture just because of the prevalence and because of the overlap with DSM and looking at eligibility. But I would say that it's just such a low incidence issue that it hasn't even caught on my radar. So I could get back to you.
No need. Thank you. I just wanted to know the general.
Yeah, in
if
general, I
what
would say
happens.
it's not a common, it's not something we do. Why would we?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess that's more of the, it has just so little relevance to, we don't, most LEPs that I know of don't bill for that type of evaluation. That's just not what we would be doing.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank y'all again. Thanks so much. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
They're in one of our, somewhere. All right. We're going to move on with the agenda then to the foreign degree evaluation services. It's number 5 on your agenda. And this is to bring everybody up to date. Well, we can see what it is right there in your memo.
Okay.
At our last licensing committee meeting, we had a presentation by NACES, which is the National Association of Credential Evaluation Services, and also the National Register of Health Service Psychologists, to talk about both of whom are licensed, or not licensed, evaluate credentials for people who were trained, got their degrees outside of the United States or Canada. Or Canada, right? Okay. And they gave us examples of what they do, how they evaluate credentials, what goes into that evaluation, and essentially how they verify that those credentials are accurate. And in fact do represent real degrees, real doctorates in psychology, etc. After that presentation, we decided that we would, right now in our regulations, we only accept evaluations done by NACES, and we decided that we'd like to include evaluations by the National Register as well, and that there were some criteria that we wanted to make sure were included in, or some items that were included in those evaluations, so that we were getting what we needed from those evaluations. And so staff has worked on changing the regulations to include the National Register and also to add what it is we're looking for in those evaluations, and then also to have those sent directly to us.
Dr.
Okay.
Horn, I
Yes.
think a quick clarification, I believe it's in statute, not in regulation.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, thanks. In statute, so this would require a statute change. Okay, thanks very much for that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Chung. Have I left anything out? Do I need to?
I think you got it covered.
Anything? Huh?
No, you got it covered.
Okay. So, yeah.
A quick question related to those requirements that you just mentioned, Dr. Horn. And for reference, I am looking at attachment D, the marked version of the proposed amendments to BMP Code Section 2914. It's lines, starting with line 42 on page 1 of 3 on that amendment, or it's also page 39 in the combined PDF. It was to our understanding during that presentation in January that not all of the NACES evaluators follow those 3 criterias that we've outlined. And so that's the reason by which we are including that in statute. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Great.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for saying that. Yeah.
And so with that question, I would move to approve the language as amended in attachment D1 and recommend to the board to adopt the language as written and proceed with seeking legislation.
Okay, so it's been moved to approve the language, to bring it to the board, and what else did you say?
Seek legislation.
Seek legislation? Okay. Do I have a second to that?
I
motion?
second.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. All those things we just said. Is there any licensing committee discussion about this? Further discussion?
Just another quick point. I
Yeah.
think to our, again, reflecting on our conversation in January, one of the things that was discussed was that the registry's process was actually at a higher benchmark than NACES as well. So that the addition of this entity is in line with the rigorous standards that we've set forth. In fact, it's even more rigorous.
It's more rigorous.
It's even more rigorous than we have currently. And so this is in addition to, in terms of providing avenue, but by no means dilutes the process in any meaningful way.
Right, yeah, thanks. And actually, I'd just like to say, one of the things that also was happening is that people were paying for a lesser evaluation and basically not opting. So we weren't getting all the information that we necessarily needed. So that's why we did this. The National Register, I think because it is an organization of psychologists, they have expertise not only in evaluating, say, the veracity of the transcript, but also the actual courses that were taken. So it is a higher level of review, and we definitely want, that's why we want to include them. So thanks for saying that. Yeah.
I'm just so chatty on this item that was supposed to flow through. The one thing I have
Presentation.
it was a really great presentation.
Yeah,
I
very
enjoyed it.
enlightening.
When this goes to the board, and if the board chooses to adopt this, and if we do get there's a lot of ifs in place, but I think it might be helpful thinking down the line if we can send potentially a message to NACES about the 3 requirements that the board or that has been enacted by that time, hopefully. And if we can also just make sure on the outreach perspective, whether it's on our website or in our newsletter, and Ms. Sork, I'm happy to write that article in summer, whenever, if I'm still here, to do that for you, and you have a verbal commitment here as if I'm still there on the board then, and so.
I'm in all your heads.
So, or co-author that with Dr. Horn and Dr. Harp Sheets, whomever. But I think just making sure that we're really sharing that with our licensees and potential applicants, because anytime there's a change like that in law, it's helpful to make sure that gets spread far and wide. So.
Excellent idea and great article, possibilities. And,
Can I add something?
Sure, of course.
What I learned, and maybe this was new to you too also, was that NACES is an umbrella organization.
Right.
And they have a series of other organizations that are members of NACES. So anybody could pick any of those other organizations, and there did not appear to be consistency.
Correct.
And that was another part of trying to specify what needed to be there.
Absolutely.
A question I noticed in some of the transcripts it was just credit only with no grades. So from just within U.S. and Canadian institutions, do we have a rough idea of ratio in terms of who provides grades and who provides credit only, or is it general practice for U.S. and Canadian that does grades, all of them?
Most do.
I'm
It would be, occasionally there's a course or a seminar or something like that in graduate school that might be pass-fail, but generally speaking.
How do you feel about an all transcript that doesn't have grades, but it's all credit only and doesn't have grades? How do you feel about that?
Well, there's another aspect to that, and that credit, a lot of people hear that and think, oh, that's a C or better. But in a grad school course, it's going to be a B or better usually. So I think that would need clarification. What does credit really mean? Where do they draw the line? And I know in the APA accreditation requirements, anything less than the B is not considered passing the course.
Many graduate schools, if you get 2 Cs, you're not in the school anymore, so, yeah. So I don't know what that means on a transcript necessarily, if it translates the same way it does yeah, so, not sure about that, so. That's, we have an expert who's saying, not necessarily, right, so, from our audience, or. I will be in a second, so, and we'll have you say something. So anything else from us? Okay. Anything from the public, Dr. Emos? She got you beat.
I'm Dr. Marilyn Emos from the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, but I'm speaking now as a private person and psychologist, and not for the department, because as probably everybody knows, I got my PhD from the University of Vienna in Austria. Those are really apples and oranges, grades. I'll just give you an example. In German-speaking universities, there are very few of them, and as you probably know, very few people go to university, so they start sorting kids out at the end of primary school, in the 6th grade, when they are finished with the 6th grade, and they put them on various tracks. So it depends on grades and behaviors and all sorts of things. And the university track, which is called Gymnasium in German, is maybe 6 to 10% of the population, so that when you, it's very, very tough. Actually, my younger daughter just finished having to do that track, although she's an adult, so that she could study. She's now studying at the Technical University in Zurich, which is the comparable to MIT. The Fulbright Commission, for example, when I was at the University of Vienna 100 years ago, evaluated the psychology program as being comparable to that at Harvard. So that you can't compare apples and oranges, right? We have already a selection process that has started maybe decades ago, and so the B at the University of Vienna is an excellent grade. They do have at the 4-semester end what they call propedeutica. So those are examinations that you can take. You can take them as orals. You take an examination per course, but you can also take them as orals. He who does not pass that, those various, and they're in all the subjects. So you have neuro and you have statistics and you have psychopathology, and all of them already after the 4th semester of what used to be the master's program. The University of Vienna flunks 70% out. So that's kind of also the selection process. So after they've gotten through all of these other selection processes, then most people can't go on. They can take it 2 more times. Most people are too scared and don't. So they don't need as many psychologists. That's the point. The market, it's only 7 million population in Austria, and in Switzerland it's about the same. So there are lots of psychologists, but they don't need as many. And by the time you get to the doctoral program, we were only, I think, 4 people, because you can practice with a master's degree in both Switzerland and in Austria. So, and obviously I was committed to getting my doctorate, but we were only 3 people, and you have to be a published scientist, and, you know, it's a totally different
Right.
system. You hear what I'm saying? So,
Which is why we need professionals to evaluate these international degrees.
Exactly. This way, you can't just look at the transcripts. Yes, I did send the transcripts, or have them sent, actually, in those days, they sent them digitally and this is 2003 or something.
Right.
They're pretty advanced. Anyway, so, right. You
Right.
have to have professionals, and I'm sure for every country, because these are all national universities, we don't have private ones in Switzerland or Austria or Germany, except they have some from foreign countries like the US, but they don't have for own. The standards are much different.
Yeah.
So that's all I have to say about that. I hope I wasn't too long-winded on that. I just kind of wanted to paint a picture of how different a system can be. And yes, Nacy's did. Boy, I paid him a lot of money, and that was quite a while.
Well, then you got the best, you got the top level.
Right.
But not everybody asked for that, so.
Yes,
So.
I did.
Yeah.
And they did a really good job. They also consulted with me. The person who was evaluating them also spoke excellent German. Oh, by the way, my PhD certificate was in Latin. Now, I don't know if they still do that. And actually, part of our ceremonies are in Latin. And then we have a German-speaking part of that. But he also did the translations, and we talked about it. So I interpreted some of the specific language in the courses so that we were on the same page. In any case, totally different situation, and that's why we need experts to do that. It's really not apples and oranges. It's sometimes apples and elephants. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other public comment about this? Any more board comment? Okay, seeing none, or committee comment?
We have a motion.
Yeah, we have the motion, and I'm now turning to you for the vote, to call the vote.
Fu,
Aye.
Harpsheet,
Yes?
Horn,
Aye.
motion passes.
All righty. So that's done. We're just moving through this here. All right.
Last words.
Shut my mouth. Okay, number 6. The informational video, agenda item number 6, informational video for supervisors. So, Mai, you want to talk about that? What we're going to do? Do you want me to talk about that?
I can talk about
Okay.
it. So in our licensing committee, on October 25th, it was brought up that there was some concern about supervisor not being confident or unsure of their roles and responsibilities. The committee agreed that we were going to create some informational videos to provide that as additional resource for them. And then from our last committee meeting in January, the committee suggested for board staff to work with legal staff. And so the board staff have met together to talk about some pertinent content areas in the laws and regulation that we could use in the informational videos. So as you can see in attachment A, we came up with some of the section, and it is listed in Business and Profession Code, California Code of Regulation, and we also include the Welfare Institution Code. They are listed in numerical orders, and we also provided attachment B for the flow chart for a visual view. So,
Okay.
not sure if you have any other question after reviewing those attachments.
So, we're going to have a stakeholder meeting about the supervisor, what should be on the supervisor videos. In September, we're going to have a 2-day licensing committee meeting, and we're going to, at that time, we've got this input, and by the way, thanks to staff for including all these areas where supervisors come into play in our statutes and in our regulations. And so I think we want to have some way, is Solid going to come and conduct that meeting, or how are we going to do that? Are we going to conduct it?
We can reach out to Solid. We have some historical success working with them through Pathways and with our focus group on the website. So absolutely, we can reach out to them and see if they would like to participate in that meeting and help us kind of conduct the input from our stakeholders and work a conversation out between the committee members and the stakeholders.
Okay, that sounds good, I think, so, yeah.
I'm curious, I know some of our other board colleagues are also interested in this supervisorial portion of the show. And I'm wondering if there's a way to make that open invitation to other board members who are interested in attending. I'm not sure how logistically that will work or if that's feasible based on the committee structure, but I wonder, I can think of at least one person
To participate in the stakeholder meeting?
Yeah.
The stakeholder meeting?
Not sure how
part?
logistically that would happen, and I defer to staff on that. But I, just given the fact that it will go to the board eventually, I suspect.
Yeah,
it might, if there's an open invitation for the individuals who might have the most opinions on there, to get them earlier in the process. Not sure if it's been done before, but just curious.
If it's noticed as a committee meeting, if there are other board members present at that committee meeting, they can observe but may not participate in order to not violate the Open Meetings Act. You can notice it as a board meeting, but then you'd have to have a quorum of the board.
So it would be all right if somebody came, heard what the stakeholders had to say, but not participate
Yeah, okay.
otherwise.
Never mind.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry.
Could also just ask to have it webcast,
And we,
and then they could
right.
just watch.
Well, but couldn't they also participate as a member of the public? Or no, because they're
No,
board
that's a
members?
conflict, and, yeah. All right, okay, so thanks.
Answered.
So we got
Asked and
our
answered.
committee meeting, but it may be a good idea to have it webcast. I think that people might like to hear that or see that, I'm not sure. So, anyway. Is this something I need to hear? Okay. All right, so I don't know if y'all have had a chance to look at this. We don't have to go into it in any detail. I mean, we are going to have to think about how we want to present it at our stakeholder meeting, how we want to organize it, and then also get input from people. I mean, we got some great people in California who are really renowned experts in supervision, and and I know one of them for sure is going to be at the meeting, and hopefully we'll have a couple folks who'll be able to be here, so that should be really good. So any other thing about this? This is really just informational at this point. I don't think we don't need to at this point in time try to organize this anymore, do we? Ms. Chung? Do we? What do we need to do?
So what I have presented, let me just add to that, is in attachment B. So that was our idea, excuse me, how to present the regulatory and statutory sections, because they can be difficult to put them together. So what I put together the
FAQ,
flow chart, the flow chart for the attachment B on page 49. So the idea was to let's get the broad idea of, okay, what is practice of psychology? So anybody should know, because supervisor and trainee, obviously they need to know what that is. And then from then on, so what are the different pathways that authorize an individual to gain hours? And obviously these pathways, supervisors and trainee need to know the requirements, and then what's specified in regulations as well through these different pathways. And the specifically on SPE, I mean like the supervised professional experience, and what they need to know. And then we branched it out to the two registrations category that the board regulated. The board regulates would be the psych assistant and the registered psychologist. So it's just things that they need to know of. So this is the idea of what staff think that the video maybe that's the flow of the video information. So if the committees are good with it or any changes, so please let staff know, and then so we can start organizing the materials. And then if the committee think that is appropriate, we can also bring this up to the stakeholder meeting in September, just to solicit any input regarding how the materials should be organized or what else need to be included.
Do y'all have anything? Go ahead.
So, this was really helpful, and I appreciate the flow chart as a very visual person, and also the FAQs was really helpful. It was very nuts and bolts. So like these are the requirements for, and I'm assuming the video will also include a best practices that extends beyond the BMP code or the welfare code sections tied to that. Correct.
That's what I had in mind for sure.
Great.
It may not be, I mean, it may be more than one video like we were talking about, but I like this organization. I think it's really good, and it'll put it in a very concise way. But really, it's the practice piece and the best practice and the lack of good practice that has been problematic. And so I think it's really nice to lay this all out, but I think we're definitely going to want to talk about some of the common problems that we have seen, and then kind of remind people what the right thing to do is, and all of that. I totally agree. Yeah.
I have a question. Are we thinking of including a piece where if there are issues that come up, how might the supervisee work to resolve
Absolutely,
these?
we
So that
should.
would be
I
their,
mean, that
yeah.
would be another thing
so
I think we
important.
would want to include, because
Yeah.
we want to include the real-life kinds of things
Yeah.
that we're seeing
Mhm.
that are often detrimental to the person seeking licensure
Mhm, mhm.
because of not knowing or being able to resolve something, or having supervisors who don't know and misinform their licensees, and that's
Mhm.
really what we're trying to.
Yeah, it feels, and that's
prevent.
what triggered
You're-
this whole
exactly,
thing. So, yeah, I
exactly.
just wanted to, I hadn't heard
Yeah.
that today.
So absolutely. So anything y'all can think of, that's, I mean, Ms. Chung's writing that down right now, those things right now. And those are the things I think we want to ask the stakeholders about too. What have you seen in your practices as supervisors and stuff?
I
And get that
can-
input from them.
The CPA Ethics Committee was working on something like that. It was coming out of, out of the committee, but the person working on it was from Biola. And I could perhaps see what has been written, which may help us.
Yeah, absolutely, it'd be
Yeah.
great. Any input, any stuff like that we can get, I think will be really helpful. We definitely want to make it friendly, user-friendly, and we want to, it's a good way to have outreach and education, before things happen. So, yeah, Mr.
One more
You just
question.
keep looking.
Looking for validation, acknowledgement. And then, I'm assuming this is done in-house. Do we need is it built into our budget do we have a budget for this video, or do we not need to worry about that and we're good?
Don't worry about it.
Great.
The board pays a pro rata to the Department of Consumer Affairs for services such as these. So it's how we have our wonderful Mr. Victoria here on the webcast providing video services. They have a comms unit that provides us support for media inquiries, publications unit that works with us on brochures. So we pay pro rata services for that kind of support. So we may not have the personnel in-house to do these kinds of functions, but we do get those from the department.
See, I told you not to worry about it. As long as we're talking about this, is there any input from the public about this? Dr. Winkleman?
Hi, hi, Elizabeth Winkleman again from California Psychological Association. So I might be jumping the gun, but I'm wondering, I'm really pleased that the board is going to be making the video. I think that's going to be very helpful. And I'm wondering if you're also planning to do a written FAQ that could be posted on the website. Am I jumping the gun to number B, or it wasn't really clear to me in the materials?
We can talk about B if the
Yeah.
committee is okay with it, because it's still within the agenda
Sure.
item. Okay. So the B, the FAQ is something already on our website, so we just give that as an example for the committee, something that we might have. And then we're also revising the general FAQs, like relating to a psychologist application and other questions as well. So we will be updating and then updating the existing FAQ on our website. So if you or anyone else think that is appropriate, we can also include that as part of the materials in the September stakeholder meeting. So just to let the participants know, hey, this is the existing information on our website. Please let us know if you think anything else needs to be added, and then we can make that into videos as well if it's appropriate.
Okay, then I would like to request then that the board consider doing a written FAQ specifically about supervision, because I think that the one that's currently there is for psychological assistance, and it's excellent. It's really fantastic. I refer people with questions about psychological assistance to that regularly. And I think that it's somewhat of a different focus than supervision. And also, not all supervisors, of course, are supervising psychological assistance. And in particular, the fact that a person can look up a specific question. So in a specific area, the psychological assistance registration, it would have like something about the forms and then something about who can supervise, how many hours, and also the citations to the regulations. It's really wonderful, so that if a person who's a supervisor has a specific question, rather than trying to go through a whole video to find their answer, I think it would be very useful to also have a written FAQ. And also, if you're going to be putting together the stakeholders and experts, I think it would be beneficial to use all that expertise and information to have two different types of product if you're willing to consider a written FAQ as well.
Can I, sorry, Dr. Winkle. So if I remember correctly, like at the last meeting, I think you have offered your help to us in working on the FAQs. So if you have anything like questions that come across on your desk that you have come across from your members or any students or supervisors, please feel free to let me know, and so I can include that in the materials and then for the September meeting as well.
I would be very happy to do that. Also, I will try to attend the September meeting, stakeholder meeting if I can.
That would be great. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you very much.
One more.
Yes, Dr. Emos.
Marilyn Emos from CDCR. This is a short one. Thank you very much for doing this. This is going to be so valuable. I get a lot of questions myself from supervisors. As you know, we're in exempt settings, so Dr. Winkleman's suggestion would be very, very welcome to us as well. I could just send them the link. So we are absolutely on board with this
Great.
and want to support you in any way we can if you need us. Thank
Great,
you.
thank you so much.
Dr. Horn, may I ask a question of Dr. Emos real quickly?
Sure.
Does CDCR have guidance for your employees related to supervision?
Yes.
Do we have a copy of that by any chance? If you're willing to share that, that might help with the FAQs perhaps for the supervision.
Now, this probably is part of the local operating procedure of the facilities. Everybody obviously has access to the California Board of Psychology website. And in addition, they have LOPs that are based on their certain situation there. I don't think we have a general one for CDCR. I think it's probably in connection with the local operating procedures of each facility that has supervisors of psychologists, of trainees that are going to become psychologists someday. So we have a lot of them. But because the facilities are so diverse in the way they're run, although we have our policy, I think probably this is getting into more detail, so I can imagine that the LOPs are the predominant. Would you be interested in any of those, or?
I defer to Ms. Chung to decide what details would be helpful, but
Yeah.
since you mentioned it and that you said you received a lot of inquiries and
Right.
that you're looking forward to just send them a link, that those inquiries might be helpful in
I see.
informing
As
our
suggestions.
development, yeah.
I could maybe collect some from various institutions, so we can see where it is. We also have different programs with different levels of care. Usually they have rotations and so on, but the supervisors, although they all follow the rules and have to do the verification of hours and all of the things.
Dr. Emos, I don't think we would want site-specific
I
instructions,
see.
but more,
Okay.
I think
In
you were talking
general.
about more global,
Yeah.
if y'all have something within CDCR that's for supervisors of psychologists, you know.
I can see what they have. That would be really important, I understand. We do have a central credentialing board and location at headquarters, so we might be able to find something there. So let me ask around a little bit. I'd be happy to send you something.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay with that? Okay. All right, any other discussion about this or the FAQs or, you know, because these are all, we are going to want to, I think, I agree, Dr. Winkleman, having something specifically, FAQ specifically about supervision will be really good, and that you've offered to help is wonderful. So, so if there's no more discussion about this, I'm just kind of looking at time. How are folks feeling? Do y'all need a break or anything? Okay.
I'm good.
You good? Okay. Let's keep going. Where are we? Agenda item number 7. How to resolve a discrepancy between the weekly log and verification of experience forms. All right. Ms. Chung, you want to talk about this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
This item included in your materials, we have provided the committee our existing regulations regarding how hours are to be verified and the submission method and the specific requirements on what needs to be submitted to us and how it's submitted to the board for review. And then there was a public comment from the last committee meeting that was raised regarding proposing the committee to consider what is the steps to take or any suggestions when there is differences on hours verified on the verification of experience form submitted to us, also called as the VOE. And the number of hours were different on the weekly log. So is there anything the committee could recommend that would be able to solve the discrepancy in those situations? So in the attachment, we have included the current regulation section in attachment A, and in attachment B is the existing Business and Professions Code on the 2914, which used to have some kind of language regarding how a possible way to propose to the board how to address this issue back in the days as a prior version of our statute. So these are some materials to consider, and then the committee can talk about any suggestions regarding how to address these situations.
All right, this is a discussion here.
Dr. Horn?
Mr. Fu,
So
yeah.
just some background so I have some clarity. So the VOE, because the VOE is signed, sealed, and delivered to us, the applicant doesn't know if there's a disparity until they're denied the application. Is that correct?
Yes, in most cases.
And so, based on that public comment, what I think I'm hearing is if there's a way for the log, the SPE log, can be reconciled against the VOE in that situation. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so I think that was what was described in that comment.
And so, the log has to be signed by the supervisor on a weekly basis to verify in the log itself, correct?
So the regulation is not as specific how, like the frequency, how the supervisor needs to be signed. It just said that it has to be signed by the supervisor, but it doesn't state the frequency per se, like specifically like that it has to be done on that week.
And historically speaking, the log is only made upon request by us. Do we frequently ask for the log at some point?
So when analysts are in doubt when they review the VOE, so for some situation that we might request a log is when the hours are quite off, like from our calculation, and we just want to make sure that mostly we try to make sure that they didn't shortchange themselves because they might miss some hours, and we just want to verify for them that, okay, you actually have enough hours to qualify for the first step of licensure, like to apply for the EPPP, something like that. So in any like weird like situation that staff has identified, then they will request a log just to help them verify.
But that's usually in the case where the VOE is demonstrating enough hours already for them to meet licensure, not that they're short of hours.
It depends, because sometimes they might fill out the log not correctly, so then we just want to make sure that they actually fill out the right number of hours. Like, for example, one of the situation is they often mixed up the hours worked versus the supervisor hours. It doesn't come up very often, but when it comes up, we will want to make sure that is correct before we proceed with either crediting or asking any more questions on those hours.
And in this specific situation that raised in public comment, it was more than just that the hours were short. It was about the quality of the hours as well. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. And there are some discrepancies. So it's quite different from, because the regs govern us that we have to go by the VOE. So that's what we're relying on to in order to review the hours and see if they meet requirements.
Understood. All right, thank you.
Yes.
Can you give me an example? Well, I think this is actually a bigger problem or a bigger issue than maybe adding something else. That's my concern. So can you give an example of a discrepancy that would happen? What would you see on the verification of experience form that would make you then say, let us see your weekly log?
If the hours come up more than it's supposed to be, like, for example, because we use the Breeze system as well to, they have a formula in there built in the system that kind of give us a very liberal rough estimate. And then if that number's kind of like a lot more than that numbers generated, then we would definitely question that, because it's not supposed to be more than what we have in our system that is like auto-generated by the Breeze system.
But how's it generated? I'm not
Oh,
sure.
so we asked them on the VOE, how many hours have you worked during that week, and how many supervision hours you get. So we key in the
And the candidate fills that in, the
the supervisor.
supervisor.
The supervisor
So
fill
how
out
many
the-
hours has the
Exactly.
trainee worked?
Yes.
Okay, and how many hours did you supervise?
Yes.
Okay,
So we also ask for start date and end date, and then we will key that date range in, and then Breeze will calculate kind of like the maximum, like whatever, like
Right.
the amount written on the form, and then we'll key in that amount, and then Breeze will calculate for us, this is the maximum number possible. And then if that, on the VOE, that number is more than that maximum number possible, then we will say something's not adding up here.
Okay.
Then we will ask for the weekly log to verify.
yeah, okay. So that's in a case where there's more.
Mhm.
So somebody's not being necessarily shortchanged there.
Yes.
They may be given,
Mhm.
okay. What about when there's less? What
So
happens?
when we will also ask them, do you want? So we'll ask, hey, can you submit your weekly log to us? And then we just want to help you to calculate, because sometimes we will see that they didn't calculate some hours, but they actually can credit that. Like, for example, they have the 4 hours of supervision, they can count up to 40, but they
Right.
just didn't. They maybe omitted when they signed the logs or like fill out the log. So we'll help them, let them know, hey, you actually can count like 5 more hours here, or like this is your total maximum that is possible per the log. And then we'll also ask them, is that accurate? Like, ask the supervisor to verify for us again that, hey, is it accurate? And then so if they said yes, then we'll go ahead with those hours. Because we just don't make the decision. We always defer back to the primary supervisor to give us the verification before we proceed with those hours.
So, I'm sorry. Sure.
I just wanted to kind of briefly add a little bit of context to the history of this issue. When I started with the board, what was happening was that the board was really kind of a clearinghouse for VOEs, and we were receiving verification of experience from individuals that may not ever apply with the board. So we came up with a legislative fix that we thought would help kind of streamline the process and allow not just the supervisor, but allow the applicant to submit the verification of experience as part of their application. So that was really kind of our intention. The unfortunate part was that we inadvertently took out the part where if it was a problem or there was a discrepancy in the hours between what the supervisee was reflecting as part of their SPE or the supervisor, we lost that process. And it didn't really become an issue until fairly recently, and it's not something, to my understanding, that we hear a lot from the trainees, that there is an issue or a discrepancy. So this has really kind of made us take a step back and say, okay, well, on one hand, we've achieved some efficiencies in our process, but on the other hand, we now have this issue with if and when there is an issue, we don't really have a process in place to, fix that or resolve that discrepancy. So I just wanted to kind of add that little bit of context to the discussion.
Did we used to have a process in place? And that we lost it when we went to this way?
Yeah, and that language is included in the meeting materials, and that was the 2014 version of 2914. So that kind of gives some context to how that language was. And I don't know if that language is something that could work to address the issue. There may be a more efficient and effective way to establish a process, but that at least lets you know what that language was at the time.
Okay, what page is that on, though?
67.
All right.
Ms. Sorek, when you say that we had the process, are you referring to the rebuttable presumption paragraph that was in the 2014 version of Section 2914?
Yes.
So that would be page 68 in the combined PDF of 83 in attachment C, in the first paragraph that begins with, upon receipt by the board of the applicant's verification.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a reason why
Sorry.
we can't go back to that process?
You guys could, as a committee, recommend that we go back to that language. However, it would be my recommendation that if you guys, as a policy, would like to see this process go back into our language, that staff can work with legal counsel on drafting some language for your consideration. The process that was in place at that time, there seemed to be a lot of steps and paperwork involved, and there may be a better answer that will both protect the supervisor and the trainee in those circumstances.
I just want to add, although this language is not in 2914 anymore, to the best of my knowledge, when I know of a couple instances have arisen, we have dealt with it on a case-by-case basis. It's just whether or not you want an actual process that's spelled out so that everyone knows what it is. And I think we've dealt with it both where a supervisor has been unavailable because of either moving, retirement, sometime incapacity, as well as where there's been a dispute between the supervisor and the supervisee.
So I think that's great, and obviously we can't have every possibility here, but I do think it would be helpful if we had something that people can look at and at least give them a general way of approaching this, and it also is a more transparent. It makes it a more transparent process as well. Y'all?
Yeah, it feels like at least there's an option.
Right.
Which we don't have right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right,
Do you need a motion?
yeah.
Was that a motion, Dr. Harpsheet?
Yes. I move that we reinstitute an option for a supervisee who has a question about the hours submitted to be able to make a rebuttal and have that addressed. Was that too wordy?
Process for, you want a
Process for
process
rebuttal.
for
Rebuttal.
addressing discrepancies.
Okay,
right?
that's a better way to
That-
put it.
okay.
Yeah, a process for addressing discrepancies in hours submitted by a supervisor, a trainee supervisor.
And the verification of experience form. Okay. And so you're asking
That we
staff come up with maybe
Yes.
some,
staff to come up with some effective procedures,
yeah. Okay.
Happily second.
efficient procedures. Yeah. Did you want to add to that?
Oh, no, I just seconded
Okay.
it.
Oh, you second, okay,
Okay,
great.
so it's
Yeah.
been moved and seconded that we ask staff to come up with a process that we can put in our regulations, statute, and regs.
Oh, yeah.
Where are we?
Sorry, I think so.
In regs? Okay. In our regs, in our regulations, that really addresses this issue of when there's a discrepancy between hours that have been, and the verification of experience form.
Yes, that we're really, we're reinstituting an option,
Yeah, we
That's
want
not
to
currently
reinstitute some process.
a process.
Yeah, some options, so.
I just
All
want
right.
to clarify, I'm sorry, Dr. Horn, that, and maybe Ms. Chung can speak to this, because I am aware of at least one case where the supervisor wasn't available to sign the VOA. It wasn't necessarily a discrepancy,
Right,
So-
okay.
but it did need to be resolved because in that case, the supervisor was no longer around to sign the VOA.
So we
So-
might want to, what would be a better way to state it, or would we add there, of course, case-by-case basis, because everything won't fit into that. So what's a better way to say it in our
Well,
motion?
it sounds like two different things, right? Well, the motion involves a discrepancy in hours, and I guess on a more global level, if the supervisor's not there, there's a discrepancy, but can we consider it the same thing?
Is it where the supervisor will not sign off on the VOE? Is that essentially?
That's,
Yeah.
that's also.
Oh,
what
absolutely. I
happens.
just want to be clear that we're not necessarily dealing with a dispute. Sometimes the
That's right.
supervisor is
That's right.
unavailable.
Uh-huh,
That's right.
okay.
Yeah. That's why we just want to say a process for dealing with the discrepancy, not, yeah, it's not necessarily a dispute. Okay. All right, so will you accept that
Yes.
little amendment to
Yes.
what you said? Okay.
And will you accept it as
Any-
a second?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, any more discussion from us?
Quick question, is the expectation, not expectation, do we have enough time, do you think, to have this back for our September licensing committee, or do we expect this to come back to us in January or whenever, in 2020? What's the timeline in mind?
Good question.
You want me not to do
Staff can work with legal counsel to have some draft language for the September meeting.
Yeah. I think we could at least have a draft, especially since we've got language from the prior statute that we can build off of.
Okay, great.
I want law, but I just have to, no, I'm just kidding.
Yes? Okay. All right, any more discussion among committee members about this? Any public comment about this?
Hi again, I'm Dr. Kristen Kaminsky, and I spoke at the last meeting about this. One of the things that I'm not hearing you guys talk about is burden of proof. According to my understanding of supervised, what the training, the CEs the supervisors have to go through, suggests over and over again documentation. Documentation, in my opinion, would mean they have to have something in writing signed by themselves and by the supervisee. I've run over this scenario numerous times to providing monthly VOEs, which would be an absolute headache because it already takes so long to process paperwork. But just having the discrepancy, and honestly, for me, and I realize I'm biased at an analyst level with this kind of a discrepancy, doesn't seem like it's really, I don't know what the word is. This is, there's a lot of trainees that complain. I know you guys you don't hear about it very often, but trainees that don't get hours, we don't bring up things like billing issues. We don't fight for our rights. I personally didn't report a sexual harassment by one of my coworkers, the one I didn't want to meet with. And if you look at all the documentation I provided to the board, you will see I provided a lot of documentation, and there isn't documentation on the other side. So I think the burden of proof needs to be established. Is it a requirement that if a supervisor is not going to sign off on hours and say that they are not done at a level, that they need to provide that proof? So I really urge the board to consider that in the laws and regs. And I'm really glad you're discussing this and putting this in. I am licensed now. I, of course, still am missing 900 hours and trying to figure out what I'm going to do with those last 500 so I can be more at standard with the nation at 2,000 hours. But I really want that to be considered, is the power that the supervisors have and not signing things until the end is a huge discrepancy. And there are, one of my new coworkers actually left that facility. So I'm not really sure. Also, there's not really a clear way on the board other than through the grievance process on how to report things so that we don't end up getting penalized. So that's something to consider. So I feel like this is larger than just a discrepancy, which on the monthly logs, it says under penalty of law. So when there is a discrepancy, it seems like at the current moment, the default is to the VOE and that the supervisor can write basically anything, even lies. And yet I have a document that says it. So I think that's really important for supervisees to understand is what what's the rule of the weekly logs and who has the burden of proof, because it should fall on both sides.
That's really a good point. I'm just going to add a little I attended a conference that took a look at, just to the point you raised earlier, sexual harassment by supervisors to their supervisees, and how often that occurs, which is like 80 some odd percent, or something like that. And how infrequently it's reported, and it's the same issue of feeling worried about jeopardizing the possibility that somebody can get licensed, and also a lack of support from their higher-ups, as well. Hey, just be quiet, you'll be licensed pretty soon, then you can do something and all like that. So I know this is a really huge problem, so I think your point is a good one that we do want to consider, and I'd like to, on our supervisor, the FAQs and when we have the stakeholder meeting, I think these are some of the kinds of issues that we want to speak to as well. So thanks very much for bringing that up. And we'll think about, I think we need to think about that for just going forward about how we're going to do that.
And were you also saying that the burden of proof? Why do I keep doing? Okay. Yeah.
But this is webcast, so.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I'm not that loud.
Yeah.
Okay. Were you also saying that in our motion, you didn't hear something about the burden of proof, that you thought maybe it should be identified more clearly?
I honestly believe that there should be in writing somewhere that says that supervisors need to have in writing support for why they are not giving those hours on the VOE.
Okay. So that perhaps could be included in the draft wording? Is that appropriate?
I
And
think
that
it's
might be
something that we
something-
can just take back as a suggestion and look to see how,
Right,
you know,
right. And
How
that
the
may be
process
something for
sifts down.
enforcement as well. And so I think it's a larger issue. Yeah, so thanks
I
very
feel
much.
it, yeah, sure.
Thank you for
Thanks
bringing it up, though, and
Thanks very much.
reminding us about that.
Excellent. Anything else?
You may have to come back. Mr. Fu?
So, quick question, following on Dr. Harpsheet's, what protections are in place currently if there is a trainee who has been sexually harassed but doesn't feel, because of a perceived or real lack of protections, what process would be in place for them to continue getting hours other than, I mean, would they have to find a new supervisor, then file the complaint? And because the complaint can't be done anonymously because of the investigations at some point, the process is that a person would essentially have to move on from their current location and find a new supervisor before going through a complaint process?
This is a bigger issue than I think we're doing right now. I'm sorry, go
I was going to
ahead.
say, it's an important one, so could
Yeah.
we put it on a future
We
agenda?
absolutely can.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really important.
Yeah, it just doesn't sit well with me. Having just refreshed my annual, yeah, it just, it doesn't sit well that someone has to find a new place of employment because they're afraid of retaliation, which seems to go against the very grain of the protections we do have in place that are required technically under federal law, so.
So you're talking about, do we have any kind of whistleblower
Yeah,
protection?
and I know that's outside the scope, Dr. Horn, of your current, of this item in particular, but it just.
For a future agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Excellent.
this is a big issue in training. on this side.
Well, and I see this from a consumer protection lens as well, is
Absolutely.
if you're,
Trainees are
yeah.
also consumers.
Exactly.
Mr. Fu, just to bring it back actually to the agenda item, I think that's one of the issues that I've heard, at least anecdotally, with when there's a discrepancy between the supervisor, or a dispute between the supervisor and the supervisee, that they won't sign the VOE because of some issue between them. And I just know that as the commenter suggested, sometimes they don't want to file a complaint, even if they talk to the board, because they want to make sure that VOE eventually gets signed.
Right.
And then once they get licensed, they just want to move on to other things. But I think it's one of the issues that we can keep in mind as I go back with staff, to look at what the process is, to understand why sometimes those disputes arise. I think that will help.
Yeah. All right. That, we're done with. So, any other public comment on this? All right, we haven't had a vote, right? And we have a motion on the floor, so could we vote on that now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Fu,
Aye.
Harpsheets,
Aye.
Horn,
Aye.
motion passes.
Great. All right, everyone, it's almost noon, and I think our next agenda item, it might take a little more than 10 minutes, which is how much we have left before noon. So why don't we take a break now and come back at 1 o'clock? Is that all right? Okay, all right. Back at 1. Back in session, 1:02 in the afternoon, licensing committee meeting. We need to go a little bit out of sequence, so we're going to do item number 10 on the agenda next, the continuing education and renewals report. So, Ms. Ms. McCochran.
Hi, good afternoon. So I will be giving you the continuing education renewals report. I just wanted to report that we have completed the audits for January through June. And I sent out the audits through July through December 2017, this past June 4th, and then the due date is August 3rd. And then an average from January 2019 to May 2019, an average of 763 renewal applications were processed per month, and about 599 renew as active each month. And we also have a higher percentage of people renewing online, so that's always a good.
Great.
Are there any questions?
Quick question. It could be faulty memory, but it seems like the numbers are getting better with terms of passage, or not passage, but passing their audits. Is that grounded in reality, or is it just my perception?
Yeah, I've been noticing that as well, that it has been getting a little better. I think a lot of it is word is getting around, and so the people who do fail, they do talk to other psychologists and let them know the correct way to store their documents and to provide that to us, so.
Yeah, I'd noticed that. I mean, that's great. I mean, 10% is probably what we would expect, right? A 10% failure rate,
Typically,
roughly.
that's what it has been. It's been a little bit higher the
Yeah, I
previous
know it's
years.
been higher.
Yeah, and I just noticed that for this time around, it's been just a little bit lower.
So that's really good. So can you, I like the fact that we're also getting closer now to the actual time. Can you give us kind of a timeline of how we're moving ahead on the continuing education, process?
Like when we would be up to date?
Yeah,
right?
when we would be up to date.
So I just did the 2017. The next one would be 2018, and I'm planning to, so I haven't talked to even Sharif about this, but I was planning on like every couple months, rather than just waiting until this audit's complete.
Yeah.
Like every 2 months, send out 2 months worth of the next year. So that way we just constantly have an audit going on. If that's okay with them, and we'll discuss that, but maybe.
Everybody's smiling behind you.
I know, they're like, oh, she's in trouble now. So I would say maybe like 6 months to a year.
Okay.
Just to be safe with that. It could be sooner.
And then we'd be caught up, and then we could do more of that, I'll say concurrent.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Great.
One of the things you just mentioned was that it seems like word's getting around to be better about tracking your hours and whatnot. Let's say, for example, we roll into the next phase for June 2017 through December 2017, and you're watching this hearing and go, oh, I should check to see what happened in 2017, and you realize you're short on hours. If someone's trying to address this proactively, knowing that this could happen, how would they go about doing that? Because obviously any hours that they do now wouldn't count for what happened in August 2017.
So if I find out that they're short during their audit, they may be issued a citation. It's a possibility that that could happen. If that is issued, then they would have to make up those hours anyways. So if they were proactive about it, even though like they couldn't go back and make up hours, they can just take them now, and it shows they were trying to be proactive, and that goes into like if we discuss first if a citation should be issued. And so if we see there's all these determining factors if it should be issued, and that is like one of them. So if we see that possibly they wouldn't be issued one. But I would just say if you're short, do the hours now. And that way at least it shows that you tried.
So just so I can clarify, if I know I'm going to, I have an idea I'm going to be audited, say I talked to my colleague who got audited and I thought, oh, just in case, and I know I was short, is it that I could start taking extra courses now? And then I could say, can you apply those courses back to 2017? How would you do that? yeah, how would you actually, when you said take courses now,
Yeah.
how would you do it so that, when you got the audit, I just, because I know you can't count them, like with TELUS, you can't count them, right,
Yeah.
for another year. So how would you, do you know what I'm saying?
Right, yeah, so like, let's say if you were selected for an audit and that's when you found out you were short,
Mhm.
then let's say you were 3 hours short.
Okay.
And it was for the 2015 to 2017 audit.
Mhm.
And so then you can take hours now.
Mhm.
If you could take hours now and you could say, can you count this towards that? And if
Mhm.
those hours that even though you took them now cannot be counted towards your current renewal cycle.
Right, yeah, no, I know that.
Yeah, and so then it would be kind of making up for it, because if you were issued a citation, you would have to make them up anyways with
Mhm.
hours now.
Mhm.
So,
Right, so I'd have to wait to be issued a citation?
You can always meet your order of abatement ahead of time. which
You
is-
can't.
So any
Yeah.
citation comes with a citation and fine and an order of abatement.
I can bring this.
I knew I should have sat up there. So, I mean, it's not that those hours are going to count towards the audited hours. It's
Yeah.
going to count towards your order of abatement. So every
Okay.
time you get a citation and fine,
Uh-huh.
if you were missing hours, short hours, live hours, whatever the hours were,
Right.
you're going to get a monetary fine most likely. And
Right.
then you're also going to have an order of abatement where we're going to require you to make up those hours.
And then I
If
would,
if you already knew you were missing them, you
Uh-huh.
could say, I've already taken these are going to be to fulfill that, I realized I miscounted, it's my fault.
Uh-huh.
And that can go into the consideration for citation and fine, but most likely it's just going to go towards your order of abatement. So you might
Okay.
just then pay the fine.
okay, yeah, I didn't mean that you would double count
Yeah.
current year, and I didn't mean that at all. I just meant, I've taken these extra 6 credits, and I mean it to, towards the order of abatement. I'm not counting it for this year, something like that. Yeah.
Usually, and then, I mean, the board and our staff take into account varying variables, so we ask you to tell us any and all reasons that are a part of that. So tell us what happened. If it's an issue of a provider didn't put it on the certificate, we can try to call that provider. There's a variety of things we do try to do in case it's more of like you had all the hours, but these hours don't count because the provider didn't put their approval on there, and if we can verify that, we accept it. So then
Got
there's a variety of ways that it can work out, but
Yeah.
for some that just undercounted or thought the hours were 27 instead of the 36 that are required, that's where they can meet their order of abatement. So when we issue that cite and fine, it's just the monetary part, and the order of abatement's already met.
Got it, thank you.
One follow-up question, which I think the short total hours, short live hours make sense. What is concerning me is the non-response. Like a third of your failures is because they choose, or not choose, but they're not responding to you. Curious to know if this particular month you saw the no response is higher, this is typical, and I'm sure they'll find out they need to figure this out when they renew. But
Yeah. I feel like it has been higher, but I don't know if it's because we did the whole 6 months at one time. But I found out that half of them have the wrong address and email and contact information with us, so they haven't updated it yet, because they'll send it later and would be like, oh, I didn't know I was under audit until I verified my license, or, we're trying to renew. So I would just advise psychologists to update your address, and if you have an email on file with us.
Sounds like a really good article, Lizelle. Miss
Oh,
McCochran.
That would really be good.
I'm pretty sure that Diana wrote that article early this year, because I reviewed it. But I would suggest it's never bad for licensees to check on their address of record and their email on file, because we use those for all of our official communications, which includes the continuing education audit, and it's often something people don't think about, and they let it languish. It'll be a 10-year-old address on file, and they haven't given us an email, or it's an email they don't use anymore, and people just don't quite think of it. But it is right there. If you renew online, you can change your address right there in Breeze.
And if I recall reading correctly, you can list the PO box for whatever reason, and your address can be held confidentially by the board as well. So that if there is a reason for you not to list either your workplace address publicly, that you can do so confidentially with the board and still list the PO address if for some reason that PO address has lapsed. So doing both is really helpful.
Absolutely, and then just always understand we're going to hit that PO box first.
Yeah.
So, I want to say something here, and I should have probably said it earlier when licensing was talking as well. And for anybody who might be watching this webcast, this is really who this is for. The links that our staff, that the board staff goes through to really help the licensee or potential licensee, and don't automatically accept something that might be amiss, but really try to help them work it out in the best way possible. I just want to say thank you, and thank you on behalf of everybody's licensed by, by the board. And I just think it's something that doesn't get out very much, it's really, there's a lot of the board is your enemy, but the links that y'all go through to make sure that people get fair treatment and you don't stop at just the first thing that comes in, just thank you. Want to commend you, so.
Echo that too.
Okay. So, any other questions or anything about our continuing education renewals, their report? I say this every time, but when I think that we go through over 700 a month, and that's more psychologists than many jurisdictions even have, total. It's just amazing to me. So it's great work. So, all righty, that's enough of my.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, back to number 9. No, wait.
8.
Number 8, sorry. And this is, I guess every committee is doing this. We're all looking at our goals for our strategic plan. And what is the goal of the licensing committee? And so what you have in your agenda there is our current goal. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about, is that adequate? Do we want to say anything else?
Would we want to add anything about whether it's communicating information about these policies, that part of our goal is to do what we can to communicate important information to the stakeholders?
Mm-hmm.
Does that, that's something we've been talking about, and it fits.
Yeah, would that be our outreach and education, or can we put that as part of the licensing committee goal?
I was thinking about it in terms of licensing, these kinds of things, licensing.
Yeah.
And related issues.
Right. Yeah, I know you were. And
Yeah.
I was just asking.
Is it okay? Okay, got it.
Yeah.
If I'm gathering what Dr. Harpsheets is kind of thinking, it might be something as simple as, making recommendations for changes as appropriate and communicating to those changes to those impacted. or something.
Yeah. something
So
like
that, like, if there's, like Mr. Fu had mentioned, making a change to our foreign credential evaluation process and communicating that, or putting together the videos for the supervision, those are things that are that licensing committee policies that, are communicated out to our stakeholders, so.
That's a great way of saying
So then that'd be part of
yeah.
our commitment.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Anything else?
It's just a comment more than, and we can see how we integrate, but one of the things I noticed, I was looking at our strategic plan that we adopted, and there was a theme in the licensing goals, as well as CPD goals, about efficiency or about streamlining the process, or whether it was like strat plan, like the goal 1.4, which is to create an online system to check application progress for applicants to easily check their application or renewal status. It just seemed like there was this theme of streamlining and making things easier, and so I wonder if that could be incorporated in some meaningful way into the existing goal before us, so it captures many of the items in our strat plan for the next 5 years. We also don't have to include it.
Efficient and valid licensing process.
We have valid. We do have
What do you
valid.
think?
I think the way the first sentence is worded is awkward. I don't know if the committee is ensuring valid policies and procedures as much as you're ensuring the board in making its licensing, renewal, and continuing education's decisions are based upon policies and procedures that ensure valid credentials.
A valid credentialing process.
Right, a process. It's just worded awkwardly, in my opinion. 'Cause I don't know if we talk about valid procedures.
It makes me think about validity, that this word valid came out of the idea of validity when we look at these procedures. Do they have validity when it comes to putting them in practice or something? That's what I think of, but other people might not think of it that way.
Mhm.
I think what the committee does is with respect to making those decisions, ensuring that minimum qualifications for licensure, renewal, and are adequately demonstrated. That's what I see is a large part of the committee. So I don't know if there's a way of wording it that way. And then the continuing education now is more of a
Renewal function.
well, it is, but it's also more competency-based. It's more of the CPD. So I don't know if you want to change the reference to that, ensuring that you're making licensing and renewal, making sure that the board is making licensing and renewal decisions based on adequate minimum qualifications, or the demonstration of adequate minimum
Could we just say
qualifications, and then
qualifications
ensuring
instead of minimum?
continued competency of licensure, something along those lines?
So the licensing committee's goal, you're saying, is to help the board? What do you-
That's what
Yeah.
I'm sort of writing it as I'm speaking, which isn't coming out great, but ensuring that the board's licensing and renewal decisions are made based on policies and procedures, ensuring the demonstration of adequate minimum qualifications.
Adequate qualifications, that the qualifications are met.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
based on the demonstrating of, an adequate demonstration of meeting minimum qualifications is kind
Do
of
we
the way I
have to
see
say
it.
minimum there all the time? We just say, the qualifications.
I didn't say bare minimum.
I think following up on Ms. Mark's comments, I think there's an opportunity to include the word pathways in our goal, just given the extensive work that this committee has done with pathways to licensure, and I feel like there will be a nice thematic tie with the word pathways, and I think it's part of what you're saying too, Ms. Marks, right? With your comment, is that there's that idea wrapped in there, and so I would suggest in some way to include that, and I'm happy to just let folks figure that out.
Because the pathways are a process.
Yeah.
Maybe we can give these ideas and staff could word it well for us.
Can I make a recommendation at all? I think it might be worthwhile to think about this committee ensures that the licensing, continuing education, and renewal policies uphold consumer protection. They ensure the protection of the health and safety of consumers and something about like the competency of psychologists to practice, something in that line, so that you're talking about that's why we do all these
That's more of a restatement of the statutory goal to some extent. I think you want it a little bit more narrowly defined. Yeah,
Okay.
more specific, I would say.
What about something to the effect of, and I'm just kind of taking what some of you have said, something about pathways to licensure and renewal of its licensees are based on ethical and competent something? I was trying to get some just key phrases.
I think it's hard to make it up now. I think it's hard to come up with the right wording right now, is what I'm thinking.
It is.
But if we give you these ideas.
We have confidence the other two committees did it. You guys can do it. You can do it.
You're kidding.
They did
Yeah,
this.
Legislative and Regulatory Affairs did it.
Did it?
So did
But
Outreach.
you don't have as much to do, those committees.
No pressure.
The battle lines.
Well, I'll go take my advice back.
Actually, if I do something more concrete, though, reading this, I wonder how appropriate it is to specify the ASPBB specifically in our goals, because while they obviously do the examination for the EPPP, it just seems strange that they're a non-governmental entity, and to put them in the same sentence with our own DCA, Office of Professional Examination Services, seems a bit strange to me. And I think, and just given the fact that some of us have relationships with the ASB, we would cause a misperception to have something there that isn't really there for other people. Because I think so I would consider or suggest striking the ASPBB portion out, only because it seems strange and out of place, given our role within that.
So what about, how did the other groups that have already done it, how did they start off? I mean, did they start off with that they're doing something for the board? So,
So it seemed like with policy or legislative and regulatory affairs, I will get used to that, that they kind of took what was existing and added to it. The outreach committee actually kind of just scratched it and started over and kind of developed like, what do we want to accomplish? And then started from there, and really the conversation started with the name of the committee, which has been revised in both the outreach committee and the legislative and regulatory affairs committee. I don't know if you guys want to consider renaming of this committee, but I think licensing may or may not cover everything. I mean, I would suggest that because you guys are talking about not just becoming licensed, but maintaining your license, that you may want to be more inclusive. So maybe starting with the name and going from there, and then kind of bullet a few things that you want covered in the goal, and then we can construct something from there. And if we want to take like a 10-minute break and staff can kind of put something together, well, we do that. That's an option for you guys to consider.
And the way I pitched it to my other two committees is that, take a look at the name and the goal, and let's see if it's clear from the name and the goal what the committee does. So there is the strat plan part, which is the aspirational part, but does it even currently reflect what we're doing now? And then what we also want to do and enhance. So taking it from there is it first applicable and relevant, or are we missing things like licensing? Sounds like just how you get initially licensed, but we tackle
But
a
it is
lot
about
more here.
licensing and maybe maintenance of competence or something like that, or
So I don't know
continuing
which way you want to word it,
competence.
but
The licensure and continuing development? For continuing professional,
Continuing.
or the licensure and professional development committee? I'm just throwing ideas. Or the entire practice of psychology committee?
See, I said we.
Since you do so much.
Cradle to grave.
Cradle to grave committee. Actually.
Well, that's Cemetery Funeral Bureau.
But I think, but the retired license status did come from this committee, if I recall, right?
What?
The retired license status?
Yeah.
Was that, or was that enforcement? Yeah, so literally, it is the cradle to grave license perspective.
So we don't want to call
I
ourselves,
didn't mean it that way, but thank you for that.
And I'd say license maintenance, but that doesn't mean much to anyone else either. But again, that's why Stephanie and I, or Ms. Chung and I are both here for you guys, because license maintenance is in my unit, and it's like CPD and renewals, and, obviously the licensing unit does initial licensing. So there's some sort of license maintenance component. I don't know if that's going to make sense in the naming, but something about maintenance of competence in there somehow. I don't espouse to have any of the ideas, but I know kicking the conversation off with, does the name fit and the goal fit with what we do now and then what we want to do? That conversation usually leads to some
well, this
better wording.
this doesn't tell everything that is encompassed. The licensing committee doesn't tell everything that's encompassed within this committee in terms of its responsibilities. So licensing and something committee could be, but professional development sounds a little, it's really maintaining competence as opposed to developing more. I mean, that's not really.
Competency of practice committee?
Something like that. Yeah, something like that, maintaining.
Well, in the title you're thinking of right
Yeah,
now?
just the name of our committee. Let's put both those things there. We license and maintenance of license in some kind of way. So let's kind of think of those two things. And then what do we do? So we ensure, we want credentials to be valid, and so we develop processes for validating
I'm
credentials or
typing up some
requirement.
suggestions.
I don't know, validating's not the right word, but
Well,
ensuring.
I put assure,
Yeah,
ASSURE
that's good.
seemed better. Valid education.
That they meet the qualifications, in terms of the education.
What about something about practice standards, like licensing and practice standards, or?
That would be okay. I like that. Practice, no. That's a psych association thing.
Okay, it may virgin to not our territory, but.
Yeah. We want to stay in our lane and do the appropriate thing. But anyways, it's something besides licensing, right? So, all right. And it may be practice standards, I don't know. There
Is
is
it licensing and professional competency?
we're going to allow the public to come up and talk.
I did turn it on, yeah. Okay.
Hi, Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman from California Psychological Association again. I wanted to suggest, well, I like the idea of maybe breaking for 10 minutes and people who are working on some language, if the board is still considering, committee is still considering that. I would really say that I would, as much as I would love to see the board give us practice standards, I don't think that's what we're talking about. Practice standards would be much broader and about care. And I think that part of what you've been doing today, which is really appreciated, is also about clarity. So I think something about clarity or conveying the information maybe could be included. And I think that even just a simple change of licensing to licensure might really do the trick, because once you licensure is a big thing. It's a big thing, and I think that would cover both the acquisition of the license, the maintenance of the license, the retirement of the license, all those different things. So I think maybe a real,
Licensure committee.
Yeah, I think that
Yeah, thank you. Just stay where you are, how about it?
The wisdom of the public.
Join our conversations.
Thank you.
And if we were in that vein, maybe the licensure and competency standards, or, because you do set the continuing education requirements, which are about competency. I
But
guess that's how you wanna
licensure
word that.
that's what licensure includes.
So you're just going to
then.
have it broad.
And again, I would say that competency is much broader. That's an ethical standard. It's a competency in many different aspects of practice. This is just meeting the basic continuing education requirements to maintain your licensure. And a person could maintain their licensure and not be competent, or vice versa, that they would be in violation of the renewals.
Then we'll be talking about the enforcement committee goal.
That's right.
I just had one more sentence to add. But, okay, so how would this sound? The goal of this committee is to assure valid licensing, continuing education, licensure renewal, policies and procedures, and psychologist competencies are maintained, making recommendations for changes as appropriate.
Could you email that to Antoinette or Mai, and they can just throw it on there so they don't have to try to.
We're not ensuring valid licensing, are we?
No, I said assuring.
No, we're not assuring valid licensing either, is what I'm saying. It's not.
It's
that we're
not
assuring-
licensing, it's policies and procedures around valid licensing.
But our policies and procedures aren't invalid. I mean, I'm not sure valid belongs there in that way, is what I'm,
Yeah.
maybe this is where we need to break up into our, 10-minute kind of thing. So if we could think of all the different things that we want to make sure we include, and then let's have a little break.
Okay.
How about that?
Yeah, let's bring it up to
Do you want to send what Mary wrote, though, to Antoinette or Mai,
Sure.
so that we can have it at least on the screen?
Okay.
Yeah.
First, I want to change this one word, though.
Which one, valid?
Valid.
Yeah.
So we're in our 10 minutes, Madam
Accurate
Chair?
too.
Yeah, huh?
We're in our 10 minutes now?
Let me see, do we have any other ideas? Let me say. So we want to make sure that we encompass not only initial licensure and what we do, but continuing licensing. And we look at the education, we look at their supervised experience, and we also look at, and they have to pass examinations.
Okay.
So if we want to keep that, and they will have to do continuing professional, do
I can email it to
continuing
Antoinette.
professional development. So those are the things that we want to get in there some way. We may not have to mention everything, and it's really a process that we're ensuring. And we want to help the board ensure that we have essentially a good, fair process, right?
So it sounds like a framework. Maybe framework should be in there somewhere where the committee creates the framework for the activities which you just described
Yeah.
as a brainstorming idea.
And that might be what's valid.
Okay,
Although
so
valid and-
I just got rid of that word, but I didn't put anything else
All right,
in it
now we're
yet.
going nuts.
Okay, so Okay, I gotta do this to
That it'll be
internet.
staff discussion, we'll bring some options back after the break. to the
Okay,
committee.
all right. I see, okay.
Okay,
So here's what was said, because we don't want to be in violation of the Open Meetings Act.
Uh-huh.
When we take our break, the staff will get together and they will work on the wording if we give all this stuff. And at the end of our break, in 10 minutes or 15 minutes, then we'll come back together and we'll have we'll hear what staff says, and we will maybe wordsmith it a little then or whatever, and just move that forward.
Do you think logistically we can also maybe go into closed session to begin some of the discussions for closed session, or is there some
No,
double
we're
doing?
talking- We're talking about 15 minutes here. Yeah. Okay.
I wasn't sure what Mr. Fu was talking about.
Internet, oh, sorry.
Yes.
I just emailed you that. Okay.
Okay, anything else we want to put in here? Maybe pathways, maybe framework, definitely process, or something that means process, and, okay.
Regulations.
Yeah.
And maybe clarity as well, I don't know, because I think a lot of
Clarity,
pathways
good.
was about providing clarity. on
Yeah,
what the
absolutely.
requirements are.
That's good. And we want to include that educational aspect
I
that you
put it
talked
in
about,
some
Mary,
there,
and
yeah.
she sent that to y'all. So, do y'all want to take a 15-minute break?
Okay.
So let's say it's 1:40, it's really 1:38, but I'll say 1:40. And so 15 minutes is 5 minutes to 2?
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll be back at 1:55. Thank you. Back from break, about 5 minutes later than we originally said. Staff has been putting together taking all our ideas and putting together a statement for the goal of the licensure committee. And let's take a look. Somebody going to read it to us from staff who did it?
So the new one that we came up with is the goal of this committee is to create and maintain a clear and efficient framework for licensure examination processes and continuing professional development through the board statutes and regulations to ensure licensees meet the qualification necessary to practice safely and ethically. The committee communicates relevant information to its affected stakeholders.
That's really good.
Wow.
I like that.
It's a team
That's
effort.
really, thank you, that's great.
Madam Chair, would you entertain a motion, or would you like to make edits to what is presented before us?
I'm not going to edit it. It's fabulous. Y'all did a great job. Thank you, everybody.
So I would
So-
move, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I would move to recommend to the board to adopt the name change to this committee to the licensure committee, and to adopt our committee goal as presented behind me.
I second.
So it's been moved and seconded to change the name of this committee to the licensure committee, and to change our goal to be what was just read to us, and is on the screens in this room so that we can all see. So, any more discussion about that? No? Is there any discussion from the public about that? Okay. So seeing none, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Fu,
Aye.
Harpsheet,
Aye.
Horn,
Aye.
motion passes.
Yay. Thank you so much, y'all. You really turn that thing on. All right, now we are on number 9. Number 9, which is the licensing committee report, or licensing report. So, who's giving it? Okay.
Just a second. Go ahead and close this. Okay, so for the licensing report, I have on the memo, if you look at the trend, it is going as the psychologists for current and active, they're increasing for this fiscal year, 2018 to 2019. The psychological assistant is also increasing for the current psychological assistant, and the registered psych are slightly decreasing. There are not any major changes to the report. One highlight that I do want to point out is on the report, if you look at attachment B, just a second, let me.
Page, oh, I got it. Page 75 of 83.
74.
74 of 83.
Yes.
Oh,
So
yeah.
page 74, where the psychologist application workload report is, you will see that for April, the open application skyrocketed. As you notice, the previous month, it also increases, and that is because we made some enhancement to our BREE system to catch those individuals who their application have already expired, and so they are required to submit a new application for the EPPP license examination.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so that enhancement was effective in January, but due to a flaw, we didn't catch everyone, so we worked with the data team to create a report to catch all of those. And so in April, we were able to catch most of them. And so a withdrawal letter went out to them, and that's the reason for a lot of application being open, because they have to submit a new application to take the EPPP examination.
That's great. I mean, I don't know about great, but it's like a lot of work, yeah, and a lot of people there, so.
Yeah, so our licensing analyst been working hard to process those applications. And then to backtrack, the previous attachment for licensee population reports, those are nothing major change there. We still have about a total of 18,644 psychologists that are current, a little bit over 1,400 psychological assistants, and a little bit over 130 for the registered psychologists that are current right now, or as of May 6, 2019.
So we're monitoring in the licensure categories, a little over 20,000
Yes.
people.
Yes. Are there any other questions regarding the report?
Looks good. Y'all have any questions about it or anything? Okay.
Thank you.
All righty. Great, thanks. I continue to be a little disappointed at our first-time test takers, but,
Dr. Horn?
Yeah.
Based on that comment, I'm curious, is there a time within a year when we see the highest passage rates for those exams, or maybe timed with graduation from school or some sort of predetermined preparation course, or are the numbers consistently that's not the right word, but fluctuating just depending on who's taking it? Does the time when you take the exam say something about who you are as a test taker?
no, shouldn't.
Okay.
Yeah. And all forms of both exams that we give are equated, meaning statistically, it takes the same number, you have to get the same number right to pass it. and
Right.
All that kind of stuff. So it
It's
should
not
make no difference.
difference, yeah.
So, anyway, that's just my, let's get higher there. Okay, so great report, thanks very much. And I think, is that it for everything open for the licensing committee? Yes, it is. So the only thing left is, are there any recommendations from anybody on the committee or public about future agenda items, potential for future agenda items for the licensing committee?
Just one thing to kind of give the licensing committee a heads up on that you'll see at the August board meeting agenda. One of the things we've talked about is, and it's appropriate because you guys are going into closed session right now, you'll be bringing that recommendation to the full board. We discovered that through another board, there is a way that we can look at adding a statutory authority to delegate to the licensing, well, for right now, the licensing committee, the licensure committee, the ability to make certain licensing decisions without having to bring them back to the full board. This would be helpful for efficiency purposes, and if there's some general guidance from the board that, you know, they would look to the licensing committee to make final determinations on things such as degree equivalency, or if there are extension requests, things of that nature, then we wouldn't have to wait to let the applicant know to bring them back to the full board, and then there's this kind of awkward discussion where not all of the facts of the situation can be talked about to the full board, and then they're making the final decision. So we want to look at giving that authority to the licensing committee, and so that will be on the August meeting agenda. So I just wanted to give you guys a heads up. We don't have to wait for the committee to talk about it first and then the board, but I wanted to let you know about it.
That's great, really great, and especially for, I think, confidentiality reasons, it feels good. It's really good. And we do already have a couple things that we talked about, right, for the next licensing committee agenda. Can you just say what those are? Thank you.
I have the one that from Dr. Winkleman regarding requesting the written supervision FAQs. And then I think that's the only written item that I have on that. And if you have anything else to add, Ms. Ferreira?
And then the Commission on Teacher Credentialing will also be giving their presentation on their credentialed designation and a similar discussion about scope of practice and qualifications for certification.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yes, more about the supervision piece, yeah. So we want to bring that back. And, okay. And that may be in combination ultimately with enforcement or something, but just some sort of a process or something, so, yeah. Okay, anything else? Anything from the public that you would like to hear us discuss?
Just quickly, for the supervisee complaints, I would ask if you could consider it more broadly in terms of not just sexual harassment, but in terms of the process for any kind of complaints about supervisors by their supervisees. Thank you.
I think that's really a good idea, yeah. So. Got it? Okay, then I think, do we have to have a motion to adjourn the open? Oh, no, we come back and adjourn after our closed session. So we're going to go into closed session now. We'll come back only to open session, only to adjourn the licensing committee meeting, so. The webcast will not continue after we go into closed session, so. Okay, thanks everybody for watching. Bye.